All right. Hey everybody, so thanks for joining us today. My name is Kristine Glauber. I'm the chair of the Intereach webinar series. And before I go ahead and introduce today's speakers, does anyone have any announcements or items they'd like to share with the group?
Yes. To rest. You need to eat that pizza.
Okay. Well, I have a couple of things. First thing is just a reminder that you should feel free to use the Intereach listserv. It's just if you have something you'd like to contribute, you can email intereach@duke.edu. And just a reminder that this community of practice was really started with the intention of being able to share best practices and success metrics and ideas for establishing and achieving excellence in this profession. So the listserv is open to anyone who is subscribed. So if you want to go ahead and just send an email to intereach@duke.edu, that would be great. The other thing is, if you have an idea for one of these webinars, please go ahead and send any of your ideas to me. It's kristine.glauber@duke.edu. And I'm open to any suggestions. And lastly, we're going to just ask that everyone hold their questions to the end, or if you feel like you have a burning question that you want to make sure you capture, feel free to write the question in the chat box, and we'll be sure to address it in the Q&A section at the end. So with that, it's my pleasure to welcome our guest today, the myRESEARCHnavigator team from the Duke Office of Research Initiatives. So we're a group of 7 research facilitators whose main goal is to connect Duke researchers with resources, collaborators, and appropriate contacts and information to successfully accomplish the research goals. So the office was launched in 2017 and features several projects that are designed to meet researchers where they're at via various channels, and some of which you'll hear about today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca Brouwer, who is the director of the Duke Office of Research Initiatives, or DORI. And she's going to give us a high-level overview of the office and set the stage for the rest of the team. So we're really excited. Thanks, Rebecca.
Thanks, Kristine. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Great. Yeah, so we're really delighted to be here. I'm going to be the one sort of kicking us off here, if I can get it to work. Hold on, there we go. And like Kristine said, so I'm the director of DORI. I really just want to set the stage and provide a little bit of backdrop information. But I think for us today, this is about sharing our programming. I know when we go to conferences, all of us here around the table, people are sometimes surprised about what we offer and say it's really quite interesting and quite a resource for the research community. So we like to share what we do as much as we can. So so real briefly, kind of our mission and scope are rather broad in the office. It's all about facilitating effective research, which I know is a broad sort of statement, but we want to make things easier for people. And part of that is connecting them with one another and to other resources. And we provide these kind of services very broadly. So in terms of the audience, these things are available to research faculty, to staff, and to trainees. Here at Duke, we have a ton of postdocs and medical students and fellows and other types of research scholars. So these things are really available to help everybody be successful. And Duke is broken up into 12 schools. So we have a really large school of medicine, school of nursing, but we also have engineering, arts and sciences, business, public policy, things like that. So the things that we offer are available to everyone. But as far as what we do, I mean, we do need to focus a little bit. It's really I don't want to say a light touch, but our interactions with people are rather brief, but it's really about helping the people in the research community feel connected. And so they're connected certainly to one another. So we sometimes connect researchers with people that might have expertise that they're seeking. And we also want to connect them to the resources or the offices, or make them aware of the processes, just so they can stop bumbling around. Duke is huge, things change all the time, and we just want to make sure that they feel like they know what they're doing. One of the things that's, I think, rather unique about us is that we, or at least here at Duke, we're one of very few groups that has support, not just from our School of Medicine and CTSA, which is where the bulk of our funding comes from, but also from the provost area. So we're sort of widely supported, and it allows us to have pretty extensive reach. So the way that we're sort of modeled is, I call it a satellite model. So everyone around the table, except for Jamie, who's here, has only a portion of their effort dedicated to our services. And of course, they're paid for it, so no one here is volunteer. But I think that this is intentional. So, or I know it's intentional, because I think that part of what makes everyone around this table very valuable, among other things, I'm looking at everyone here, is that they spend a lot of the rest of their time actually still engaged in research. I think that they know the problems that people face. They can hear, you know, what are the pain points, you know, what's new. I think that they're always sort of relevant. And so that brings a lot of value when you're talking with other folks. You're not just so disconnected because you're a full-time navigator, and we'll talk more about what that means. And I will say, we moved to the satellite model because I think initially back in, I think it was around 2015, before these services came into our office, there were 2 full-time people hired to basically man or woman a hotline. And that's what they did all day long, sort of waiting for people to call them, and they were not engaged in the research otherwise. And so it's difficult for them to be able to answer those questions, or really understand what it's like to be in the field. And I think that is why I think initially it wasn't as successful a program. And other things I think that are beneficial about the satellite model is that we can be resilient. So the office itself can be resilient. If Carrissa, for example, finds a great opportunity away from our office, which would be really terrible, but we could somehow, you know, we could probably manage it. But likewise, I think that we know that for, you know, Carissa's, her portfolio of other work, it expands, it contracts, and we can all sort of expand and contract as needed. So, but really, I think the reason that we moved to this model, in addition to sort of its resiliency and being embedded, is that we can have sort of a broader or a breadth of expertise that we wouldn't otherwise have. And I know everybody around the table is going to talk a little bit about their backgrounds, but by having a portion of Carissa's brain and a portion of Sunita's brain and Emily's brain and Jamie's brain, Kristine's brain and my brain, is that we all bring something very different to the table, and that sort of makes us better, and it makes us sort of course, an interdisciplinary team, which I know is something you guys discuss a lot in Intereach. So, so this is the last sort of part of the model that I think is really important and is what contributes to our success. Having people with very different backgrounds allows us to match the someone on our staff with the right researchers. So like I mentioned, we cross lots of different schools, so people have a variety of research interests, and we like to match the right person that can have a conversation and understand sort of what they're saying and what their needs are. I think it legitimizes what we do. It helps us build rapport with the person. I mean, you may have actually been trying to do exactly what they're trying to do now. I mean, they're inherently, I think, going to have more confidence in your ability to help them. I think the other thing that's really great, we virtually meet a lot. We're on email a lot because all of us are actually almost in different physical locations most of the time. But when we come together and we're tackling problems, or we talk through something that an individual investigator might be grappling with, I think we can sort of toss in different points of view or different experiences, and I feel like it makes us better able to handle whatever the situation is. And so I think lastly, just as far as the structure of our office, we can be found any way people want to find us. I think like Kristine said, we like to meet people where they are. We are dealing with some people that are, your postdoc in their 20s, or even sometimes we are working with undergrads, or we might be working with, tenured professors that have been here and they're 87 years old or whatever, but we want them to find us any way that is comfortable for them. So we have email, we do a lot of things with a personal touch. So we are constantly out and about meeting with people. And some of our services are available in My Research Home, which I think Jamie's going to talk about. So we have a lot of tech savvy people that like to literally press a button to ask a question. We offer that. And then the other thing we do, which is another high touch scenario, is that some of the folks in our office are offering other services. And so we'll sort of explain to them in the moment when they're offering a service with their other hat on, how they can be served by our office. So if people want to find us, in theory, we have every way available. We even have a phone number if they want to go back to that. So I really don't want to be the person. Hopefully that gives a little bit of some sort of the framework of how our office operates. I'm the top left here alphabetically. My background is in behavioral psychology, and I was in research for many years before I moved into the central role, working in global health, public health, epidemiology, and health behavior. So I tend to cover some of the items in that area. But I think everyone else here, I'm going to let them introduce themselves and maybe talk about their backgrounds as they go through their portions of the talk. So I know Emily, so there's Emily there with the pretty pink flowers, and Carrissa are going to talk about what it's like to be a navigator. Sunita will talk about being a connector, and Jamie is going to be talking about our technology components. So I'm just going to pass the baton on over to Emily. So Emily with the pink flowers is going to...
It's in front of my house and everything. So I'm Emily Miller. I've been at Duke now for working on 8 years, which is astonishing, but I did my PhD, like it said on the previous slide, in genetics and genomics, and that was my background as a basic scientist. And then since then, as you saw, I'm only 20% navigator. I'm also a project leader at CTSI in the translational science realm. I've learned a lot from my colleagues in that. I'm looking at Sunita, I can't tell that, but and I also will let Carrissa introduce herself before we get into life as a navigator.
Hello everyone, I'm Kristine Dixon. I've been at Duke for almost 3 years, and I also wear 2 hats as I'm also research program leader in the Office of Clinical Research, where we kind of work with study teams on their specific research protocols. So it's having the role as a navigator is a great handoff from one half of my brain to the next. Short commute. And my background is actually split between a degree in computer science and years working in industry as a programmer and software developer, and eventually getting a master's in health communication. And along that path between the 2 degrees, I did a lot of work on community engagement. So with those 3 prongs, I really work with the study teams to focus a lot on their IT data, but I also have a good understanding of their clinical research as well. So I'm kind of the liaison between those 2 worlds of technology and clinical research.
And just so you know, that little screenshot is the button where you can press ask a question. It literally says ask your question, and then Chris and I just wanted to share some examples of questions we've gotten in the past. So this is one from a faculty member in emergency medicine who just asked, are grants from foreign sponsors handled differently? And he was really wondering about paying himself, paying his trainees, because he had only received NIH funding in the past. And so we reached out to this guy, Broderick Rainey, who's in an ORS, or the Office of Research Support, who actually happens to be an expert in the international grant work. And we always like to say we don't know everything, but we try to find the people that do. And this is a really good example of that. And so the short answer was, yep, they're handled differently. But then the long answer, which is what we like to provide so people understand where the differences may lie, involves all sorts of things where graduate students have tuition remission, and NIH rates are negotiated on an institutional basis. So making that connection is what answered this question. It wasn't just Emily saying, yep, it's different. It was, it's different, here's why, and here's the guy you actually need to talk So this is one that I've gotten many times, both from onboarding, that you'll hear more about from Sunita, as well as a navigator question. But people looking for a list of transgenic mice, there are some different pre-drivers and stuff that you might need in many different labs, and it'd be really great to not have to order them every time from a vendor, but if they're already on campus. So that's what Mouseface does. It's literally a database where you input the mouse strains you have in your colony. And this is open only to Duke folks, but anybody can go and look at scholars at Duke, which is at the bottom there, and search for that line, because if it's in a title or a publication, it'll be pulled up there. And then if they need to make their own mouse, there's also a facility on campus to do that. So again, we try to have a more comprehensive answer than just, yep, here's a list of mice. It's more like, depending on what you need to go to one of these 3 places and talk to these people. And then my final question before I hand it off to Carrissa was an emergency question, which is always exciting. They were looking for the specific cell line. Is it available at Duke? They had ordered it from this vendor, ATCC, but it was on back order, and they were like, we need it by noon tomorrow. This was at 4 p.m. on like a Thursday, I think. And I was like, okay, well, we'll figure it out. For my time in graduate school, I knew about the CCF, which is the cell culture facility. They have a lot of lines frozen down, and even some living in flasks. So I contacted Zermina, who's the specialist there. I think she's still there. I have to check the list. I haven't talked to her in a few years, but and also found some backups just in case she didn't have anything going at that time. And so that's where there's a DCI repository, and I sent them to that. And so it worked out fine, and we were able to get them on time. So this is just an in-the-moment, exciting question.
So yeah, Emily focuses a lot on basic science, and here are a few examples of the questions that I sort of have addressed in clinical data and digital health. So this first question came from a data manager who was trying to build a data mart with an external institution. Actually, it was a community-based clinic, and they wanted to work through the technical requirements of the data mart, but they also wanted to find out about any legal documents or agreements that needed to be developed as a part of that process. So, and I was familiar with the organization that they were working with, so I facilitated a meeting with our Office of Research Contracts, really to talk about the legal terms of data sharing, but also talking about what should be included as a benefit to the community partners. So in addition to sharing data, that they would also get a benefit from this research partnership. So I included suggestions on the text that they should include, also about making sure they ensure patient privacy, both for Duke and the community partner, as well as making recommendations about technical specs so that they could share the data in a way that would allow the data to remain sound and private, but also allow them to continue conducting research in the future. The next question that I got was actually from a research coordinator who was interested in using text technology to kind of communicate with participants. And so she's at a remote site and wanted to know if anyone has done that here at Duke, and basically what she needed to do. So I made some recommendations with her to just kind of work through having an encrypted cell phone, first of all, again, to ensure patient privacy, and thinking about the actual messages that are going to the participant, considering someone else may be reading those messages on the cell phone. So limiting the information that is shared, if it's, appointment reminders or that sort of thing, without getting into the details to reveal what actually was happening in the study was important. And then over time, we actually learned about resources where they could use REDCap and Twilio as a new technology solution. So I was able to circle back with that study team and offer that as an option for them to incorporate in the study or in future studies. So, that included collaborating with our mobile app gateway, our REDCap development team. So, really expanding their question to make sure they knew all of the services that were available and options to them for, this implementation process. The last question I got was actually from a basic scientist, and typically I would have tossed this over to Emily, but his question was, he wanted to actually validate his preclinical animal research by looking at clinical outcomes for patients. So he wanted patient data, but he didn't really want to work through the clinic. He just wanted the data. So I really talked to him about you have to have a collaborator on the clinical side to look at what you're trying to do. You actually need a study to define what you want to look at to analyze the clinical outcomes. I also told them about the cohort discovery tools that we have to determine feasibility, just to see if the patients were even there, before he even took the next step to start a process for conducting a study. And then talked to him about existing data repositories where he may be able to answer that question without conducting a study. So those are just some of the options that we wanted to make sure they know, and to kind of loop them into the clinical research world so that for future research, he kind of knows where to go. So in general, the hotline that we've served over 600 questions that we've answered to date, which is astonishing considering our team, of people that are, at a small percentage efforted for this work. And we've gotten 113 feedback responses, but, near perfect on the response rate. I also take that as good because most people, if they feel bad about a service, they're more likely to complete a survey. So I think the percentage of people who have responded, or though it's more telling for those who have not, but we also don't get a lot of complaints. So I think that's very telling on our work. And we continue to get referrals from people as well. So a few ways, as Rebecca mentioned, for folks to contact us, and Jamie will talk a little bit later about My Research Home, but we have a web portal that people can access our services, as well as an email that actually is a shared email account that's triaged to all of the navigators to read, and we review the requests as they come in, and based on the area of expertise and the question being identified, we sort of assign who's the best person to lead the response, but we also work together in some cases to provide a comprehensive answer to the study team. So after they click the button that they need help, this is just a snapshot of the form that they complete. We ask questions about the type of help that they need, asking them to give us a little more detail so that we can assess who should best answer the question, and then the best method to contact them. Yeah. So now I'll turn it over to Sunita, who will talk about the onboarding services.
Hi, so I'm Sunita, and I have been at Duke almost like 12 years now. And before I came to Duke, my expertise or my research area was dermatology and pathology. Since I've been at Duke, I've been working in the area of HIV as well as in general clinical research as well. In the sense for the past 5 years, I've been consulting with the different study teams to help them out, on their particular projects that they're working on, especially when it relates to, QI projects, if it relates to clinical sciences, if it relates to some of the data sciences, as well as
basically everything. This is Rebecca chiming in that I'm pretty sure Sunita has met almost every investigator at Duke at this point. They all know her name. When someone says, I can't remember the name, I'm like, it was Sunita. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, so anyways, thanks, Rebecca. But the thing is that, until 2 years ago, we really had no way of orienting research investigators who are absolutely new to Duke. And so what we tried to do was to sort of implement a process so that, we can help the investigators who are absolutely new to Duke in order to get their project started over here. The stuff that we also realized early on was that, the investigators would learn from their colleagues or their mentors, and sometimes they would even make mistakes. And because of that, sometimes they would get dinged for it, which also led to a lot of frustration, and it left an undesirable first impression of Duke. The other thing was also, by the time they could figure the things on their own, it also caused sizable delays. And because of that, especially if they have an NIH project, then they could also get dinged for it. So the way we started doing this was to establish a one-on-one consultation with the investigators. What we try to do is to understand the type of research they do, what stage of the career they are in, and whether they are a transfer or a new investigator. The other thing that we also try to do is to bring in a unit resource. So, whichever department the investigator belongs to, we try to find somebody from that department to be also present at the table. So that way, like the investigator also gets the information that is particular to the department that they are going to be working in. The other thing that we do during our consult is also introduce them to myRESEARCH home portal, which Jamie will talk to you in a little bit about. And then also, talk about Scholars at Duke. Scholars at Duke is basically like a mini LinkedIn service that the investigators can use. They set up their profile on this particular page, and then it allows them to be visible to all the Duke faculty, as well as, the staff. And then the other thing that it allows them to do is for others to find them as collaborators or mentors. The third thing that we also talk to them about is, the relevant processes and offices that are there at Duke to help them out, on their particular projects. We also help them, to connect to the resources that are available to them in order to do the research. And we connect them to potential collaborators if they wish to know about, a collaborator that they could work with. Especially this helps in the area of, like basic sciences, where basic scientists want to collaborate with clinical researchers so that they can have access to the tissue samples as well as, like the clinical data from the patient charts. The other thing that we also do is to make sure that they have that connection with myRESEARCHnavigator service, so that way anytime they have questions about doing research at Duke, they should be able to connect with us. So who do we provide this service to? We basically provide this to all the new faculty that are coming to Duke. The other folks that we also offer this is to all the new faculty that are hired at Duke. We also, meet with fellows who are evolving into researchers, as well as, anybody else who is identified by the peers or their unit leaders. How do we identify these researchers? Usually the way we identify them is by a list that is provided to us by the HR. There are also, referrals that come to us, and we meet with them as well. And then we also have a little one-pager with our information that we insert into the hiring packet for all the new investigators. So once we get the list of all the new hires, we contact the investigators by email, and then we tell them more about our services, and then we also extend that invitation to the appropriate unit resource as well, so that everybody is on one page. Everybody knows that we are trying to schedule this meeting, and then they can also provide their information about when they are available to meet with the investigator. The navigation team then, also does a little bit of detective work at the back end. We sort of, look up the SPS proposals that the investigator may have, any awards that they may have, or if they have submitted any protocols to IRB, if they have any publications, we sort of look them all up, and then what we do is to match the navigator to that investigator, so that that particular navigator can meet with the investigator and provide them the information that they need in order to get their project started at Duke. Typically, this the meetings take about 90 minutes, and first we thought that's a lot of time, but believe it or not, we do use up all the time, and we don't even realize where the time goes, and the investigators are pretty engaged during that time as well. So usually when we meet with the investigator, we ask them what are the projects that they plan to start within the next 3 to 6 months that they are at Duke. They can also ask us about any small award that they have, any questions about, why is IRB taking so long to approve their study, or, if they want to apply for grants and they want to know what are the funding opportunities that are available to them both internally as well as externally. or if they want to, abstract data from patient charts. I mean, they could ask us any of these questions. And what we do is to sort of, not only provide them the information regarding, like the questions that they have, but then also introduce them to My Research Home, where they can also find the information on their own and be able to ask questions as well. So for each investigator, usually we talk about the processes and the best practices that are put in place at Duke, because every institution is different. Every institution does things differently, and so when an investigator is new to Duke, we try to introduce them to the processes that are specific to Duke and also the best practices that are involved. The other thing that we do is to connect them with their department or the unit level. We provide them context, to both the institutional as well as the unit level people, so that way, they know who to contact and who to go to if they have any further questions about, getting their project started. The other thing we do is to connect them to the services and the resources that are available to them, and also what are the different ways to get information in case they want to look up the information on their own. So the additional things that we do also is basically the researcher leaves with all the information that they need to know up front, so that it's easier for them to sort of like get those projects that they need to start right away. We also provide them an overview of all the stuff that they may encounter as and how they're getting their project started, and also provide them the information about where to go if they were to ask for any help in order to get their project started at Duke. So overall, we have done about 395 consultations so far. We've gotten like 157 feedback survey responses, and as you can see, like we have gotten like almost 5-star ratings on all of the consultations that we've done so far. So this is just the need help widget, which Jamie will again explain in detail in a little bit. But if the investigator goes to My Research Home portal, they can go to request a consultation, or otherwise they can email us directly and ask and request a consultation with us. And then lastly, this is the intake form that we have. We've kept it small and sweet and simple, just so that they can finish it in little time, and then provide us a little bit of information about what kind of research they're involved in, and so that way we can match the appropriate navigator to onboard the faculty. And I think that's probably it on my end.
Yeah, and before I pass it off to Jamie, I just want to say, I think we've talked a little bit about the star ratings associated with these satisfaction surveys. What we didn't show you are some of the commentary, and I think that what's been really interesting, especially with the onboarding, when we have people coming from other institutions, I have seen some really effusive comments that people are flabbergasted that we offer this at Duke, and said, I've heard people say more than once something like, this was the most valuable 2 hours I've spent in years. Like, I really feel like I'm well set up. At my other institution, we had nothing like this. It's really, I feel like I've looked at a lot of satisfaction surveys in my life, and I don't know, the language is just stronger in some of the comments that we receive. And I really think this is entirely because of the relevancy and the deep sort of answers that we provide. And, even though it's not a ton of time, like Sunita said, they're about 90 minutes. It's entirely about them. It's not a blanket orientation where you're looking at a slideshow about things that you really don't care about. So, but anyway, I want to pass it off to Jamie. To talk about our IT connection.
All right. My name is Jamie Wylie. I'm a program director with the Office of Research Initiatives. And I'm going to talk a little bit about My Research Home and My Research Path. Derek Jones is our product manager for myRESEARCHhome, and he's actually in Antigua right now, so he could not be a part of this presentation today. But yeah, throughout this whole presentation, y'all have heard a lot about myRESEARCHhome. And you can actually go myresearchhome.duke.edu. You can get a little glimpse into it, but it is a personalized portal for researchers at Duke. So you log into it with your Duke unique ID. So if you're outside of Duke, unfortunately, you can't get into the actual portal, but you can see some more info about it. And it's pulling from various systems across Duke and knows a lot about you. So as you kind of saw on some of the previous slides, there's some different widgets throughout. There's one that's funding opportunities. So that one has a profile associated with it, and it spits out funding opportunities that are very specific to your type of research and your interests. It has your training, so it will pull in your required trainings from the learning management system. It has some resources and services that we've uploaded into a different database that it pulls from. Lots of different options. It knows about your grant funding, so you can manage your financials and your effort through the widget. So it's a very personalized approach to doing research at Duke. And if this is something that you're really interested in and want to know more about, Derek said he is more than welcome to field a phone call with anyone. So if you want to reach out to him at, I think it's derek.jones@duke.edu. Nope, it is not.
Derek.m.
Oh, there's the other
There's
one's
a
football coach. But yeah, you can reach out to us and we'll get you in touch with Derek if this is something that you are really interested or might want to bring to your own institution. So he did really want to focus on kind of one case study on how we've used really a community approach to myRESEARCHhome. And so one of the most recent widgets is the My Funding Opportunities, which I just mentioned as one of our examples. But so this one just was released in May, but took a lot of time to develop it and a lot of user feedback. And so the way Derek approached this to make sure that this actually solved a problem and was useful to the faculty who are going to be using this widget is that they first realized that there was a problem. There's a feedback button in myRESEARCHhome, and so I think they'd gotten a lot of requests for something like this. They go around and talk to people and really make sure that myRESEARCHhome is solving needs and continues to evolve to solve the needs of researchers. So they realized that there was an issue with funding announcements, and one being that funding announcements were in lots of different places. There was no one central source for funding announcements, and some of the different places weren't open to everyone. There was limited access, or it was only to certain schools. So what they first decided to do was to coordinate with those offices that are the funding owners or the announcement owners, and to use one single database for everyone to upload all of their funding announcements. So now myRESEARCHhome can pull from that database to display funding opportunities to researchers. So the next step, once they got all the data into one place, was to figure out how to really make this useful to faculty. So they designed some focus groups with mock-ups of the proposed widget, and they did 3 rounds of these focus groups, and he said after each round, they would take that feedback and tweak it, and then bring it to the next round and get comments on that. So they were even kind of in the moment updating things as the focus groups were going on. He also wanted to note that with the focus groups, every school across the institution was represented at the focus group. So as Rebecca said earlier, we've got School of Medicine, engineering, all the different ones across campus, School of Nursing, that everyone had a say in the design of the My Funding Opportunities widget. Once they did the focus groups and kind of moved past the mock-up stage, they then had some one-on-one sessions where researchers were able to actually click through and utilize the widget. So they would try to get them from A to B and see how they utilize it, and then they would take input from those sessions to make it a little more user-friendly. After those sessions, they implemented all of those changes and then moved to a pilot phase where it was actually live in myRESEARCHhome, and they allowed about 60 users to have access to the tool, so it wasn't turned on for the whole school yet, without any support or guidance. They just got to go in, play with it, see how they would actually use it in the real world, and then after about a week of use, they sent a survey to see how that went, and then implemented some minor tweaks based on the feedback from the pilot users. So going through this process of really getting user feedback, help to increase the likelihood of use of this tool. So as you can see in this chart, from between phase 1 to phase 2, they asked at the end of, which I'm guessing, not exactly sure, phase 1's the focus group, phase 2 is the one-on-one. They asked the faculty and staff to rate their likelihood of use of this tool. So once they improved everything by phase 2, the likelihood of use, it was 100% of people said probably or absolutely they would use this tool. So really utilizing this feedback to make sure that they are solving the problem and engaging users with this experience. So to date, it just released in May. Derek said that they have about 300 people have created profiles within myResearch Home to utilize this widget. And he said they're averaging about 9 to 10 new profiles a week. So it's continuing to grow. And yeah, it's only been live for a couple months.
And this is Rebecca again. I do want to mention, if any of you are interested in myResearch Home, I've been reminded the team just worked to make it as open source as possible, so that, because we did have a lot of institutions wanting this, again, we can Derek or I or anybody in the office is happy to connect you to that code if needed. So.
All right, so another use of technology, and this is kind of my main focus in the Office of Research Initiatives, is myResearch Path. So this is a brand new project that basically we're trying to create one central location for all resources, services, guidance, policies, everything that a researcher might need or encounter throughout the entire project lifecycle, all in one place. So right now, if someone is trying to do research, they could interact with 20 to 30 different offices throughout the life cycle of a project. And to know exactly what they need from the different offices, what the offices offer, you would have to know where to go. So that's 20 to 30 different websites, or maybe it was in an email, it isn't actually on their website. So there really is no one central place to guide you through the entire process and get you to the right people at the right time. So what we're trying to do is create that one site that those 30 different offices will contribute their content in a way that makes sense throughout the life cycle. So it's putting all of this information in context and harmonizing it to this one location. And this will be available to facing faculty and staff, so both scientific staff and grants administrators will be utilizing this tool. So just to kind of go along with the community approach to creating this tool, and again, it's in the very early stages of development. It's in PowerPoint right now. We haven't even moved to technical development with it. But we wanted to make sure we were solving a problem by creating this, that it's not just another tool that people will go to once and then never utilize again. So we've run several focus groups. We've done a ton of one-on-one interviews. So we've talked to about over 60 at this point potential users, all research faculty, staff, and grants administrators, to get their input on what features and functionalities would really make this useful and help them be more efficient in their jobs at so yes, we've gotten a lot of feedback on how they seek information, how they would utilize the tool, when they would utilize the tool, to make sure that we are solving a problem with this. And the other collaboration that's probably going to be the biggest part of this is getting those 30 or more support offices to contribute their content information. So we've met with all of the offices several times. We hold monthly stakeholder meetings. We really are getting everyone engaged and excited to be a part of this research enterprise at Duke, to be able to contribute their content in one place, and then also making sure that we have the framework so that it makes sense for everyone. So yeah, it's been an institution-wide collaboration to really get this project going, and we're excited to see where it goes.
So that's actually sort of the bulk of our content. Hopefully you get a sense of maybe, I guess, what we do. I think inherently all of us are connectors. We've all been at Duke a while. If we don't know the answer, like we said before, we know the person who hopefully knows the answer. And we are working also from a technical standpoint to bring things into one place so it's all easier to access and just to facilitate effective research. So happy to either take questions, or Kristine, if there's anything else you think we should touch on, let us know.
Great, thanks guys. This was really awesome. I want to open it up to questions from the rest of the group.
Dead silence.
Hey, this is Laurel Passantino at Arizona State University. I have a question.
Yeah.
Which is, at the beginning you mentioned that this is, that you're all sort of partially funded on this, and then you all have things, I guess, that are, you're on sponsored funded projects or other initiatives in the university. What's funding this?
This is Rebecca. This is largely funded by our CTSA, our Clinical and Translational Science Award. And then we do have additional funding from our provost area. So it's a little bit of a combo, but really, frankly, largely the NIH. Those of you that may not be aware of the CTSAs, that's to me very much about infrastructure. So sort of the undergirding of research support. So that's where I want to say probably 85% of our funding comes from that grant.
Okay, so that funded like the development of all of these tools, and then also your time and.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Actually, let me clarify just a little bit, because when it comes to the technology tools, it was sort of sparked by the Clinical and Translational Science Award, but I think, frankly, because they've proven to be important beyond that initial spark, it's become a part of operational funding for Duke or for the School of Medicine. So now we have hybrid models of funding, so which is great, because you don't want a grant to be supporting a technology tool. You're not guaranteed your grant funding, right? So most of the technology stuff is split, and again, to this notion of resiliency, I think a lot of us are split between some NIH funding as well as operational funding within the different schools.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah, sure thing.
Hi, this is Melissa Vaught over at University of Washington. I thought this was a really
I think we lost you.
Oops. Melissa, we can't hear you if you're still talking.
You can also chat questions if you'd rather. We can see the chat. Somebody just chatted to all of us, so it seems that we can see those if that's easier.
Maybe, can no one hear us? Can anybody hear us?
We can hear you.
Okay.
I think we lost Melissa though, right?
Yeah.
Is there a database behind the scenes that the navigators can use to find info? That is a great question. Okay, so I'm sorry, I keep taking. Emily, do you want to talk about our database?
So we do have databases. We have one for the questions we receive, and that's kind of like a knowledge bank, and that's where Chris and I pulled our questions from today. We also have an onboarding data bank where we have everything we've ever told a researcher in their follow-up report, as well as notes on what kind of research they're doing. I even have a section of because the group I'm in that isn't Dory has internal grants, so I even select I think they'd be good for these 3. So we keep all sorts of things and info.
And one thing I want to highlight though is we've made a very conscious choice. So for example, the 677 questions that we've received, while we log the answers, both the short answer and the long answer, we don't expose those to anyone because things change so often. We use it, we sort of, when we get a question, we check it first to see if we've already answered it, and then, but otherwise we sort of, I don't want to say we keep it secret, but we just don't want to inadvertently guide people in the wrong direction if something has changed.
And we actually use RedCap for our database, so that's our staple for Duke research.
How do you centrally coordinate efforts? Okay, sorry, Melissa has typed. How do you centrally coordinate efforts across navigators and myRESEARCh? I couldn't hear the database name. Please repeat. Oh, please repeat. RedCap. Yes. Okay. So Carissa's answering that question. So how do we centrally coordinate efforts across navigators and myRESEARCh Home? I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this correctly, Melissa. So you type if you need clarification. I mean, we meet all the time. We see ourselves as one big team where, frankly, when we hear about the needs in the research community, if it's something that needs to be done in a high touch way, we figure the navigators are going to try and tackle it. We think of My Research Home as self-service. So we try to encourage, or at least share that information so My Research Home might sort of add a widget, for example, or start to incorporate something that might be found in a self-service tool, or My Research Path as well.
And that's another database we actually keep is things we hear consistently and we think we might be able to come up with a way to solve them, or My Research Home might be able to, we try and keep track, like, oh, we've heard about this problem like 5 times from these schools. So just to make sure if there is this need out there, we're the ones hearing about it, we can try and figure out a solution.
Hey, this is Kristine Glauber again. I had a participant message me directly about how many, sorry, it disappeared, how many people are in the navigation team. So there's 7 of us. And then asking about if we're volunteered by peer researchers or from Dory. So we're all, as Rebecca said, we're part of this satellite model. So we've got portions of our effort in Dory, but I don't know, maybe it brings up a good point. Rebecca, do you want to speak at all to how you brought this group of people together?
Oh, you mean like how they got poached into this?
Might not.
No, I think, yeah, it's a great point. So I think every single person around this table was known to me, other than Emily, who was interviewed. Everyone was known to me ahead of time. It's a really important point, Kristine. And they were known for several things. And some of it is, first of all, expertise, right? They're also well respected around the institution as being knowledgeable, really good people skills, have been here at Duke for a while, and frankly are just known to be connectors, right? Like you keep this catalog in your brain and you inherently want to help people. So,
and although I was a stranger to Rebecca, I did an internship with the people who are the navigators before, so she was kind of like,
I heard that she was great, so I trusted the person that told me she was great. Does that answer sort of your question, or does that address what you were talking about, Kristine?
That addresses what I was talking about, and I will see if the person who asked the question wants to add any more details. But then I think Christine Hendren also put a message in the
we're reading that one.
I think putting you on the spot. You've done so much great stuff and all the combined resources and have made it tangible progress and support. Taking lessons from this experience to bring insight to maybe smaller institutions with fewer resources to throw at these issues. Are there aspects of meeting research needs that you have now realized bring great value and can be done with a lower lift analog? If a group wanted to bring a navigator's lab service, okay, that's a really good point. So I guess to me I think that this could be possibly done. I think that at another institution with lower lift, and I would love to hear what you all want to say about this too. Do you want to? Yeah,
Carrissa, I had experience at another institution where we didn't have such a formal service, but the project managers who led protocols and managed studies, we basically started our own little support group. Like once a month, the project managers across the School of Medicine would get together for lunch and just talk about best practices, lessons learned, and we didn't have a formal database that we collected this in, but we all came with notebooks and suggestions. We had presentations once a month from other, from each other to kind of share our knowledge. So I think even at a lower level, just the sharing of knowledge, if you formalize that in a consistent way, whether it be webinars like this, or whether it be in-person meetings, or even a newsletter or something where you can sort of consolidate those things on an ongoing basis, I think is a great way to start.
And maybe to add to that, I think, because I agree, I think that if I think about our hotline service, it's not like it takes hours and hours. We answer a question, probably, I'm going to guess on average, it takes us 10 minutes. Is that everyone's sort of nodding? If we take an average. So you can imagine people might dedicate that time if they're part of an informal network like Carissa's talking about. I think if I were to put dollars on something, it would be probably 10 to 20% of a person's time to do two things. One would be to coordinate, make sure things are followed up and tracked, right? So even something like REDCap, if your institution offers it, it's free, but just some kind of central place to manage it. But then also a front door. So if you have any type of research support office that's willing to give a front door, even to a volunteer type of service, I think a lot of people just like to help. You probably know people all around you that are the go-to person. It's sort of finding those go-to people and bringing them to coordinate their efforts, but with a visible front door, so that you're reducing the barrier to reaching the people that might want to provide answers. That's my best guess, Kristine.
And technically, something as simple as a group listserv for folks who would be interested in, signing up to be able to toss out questions, and then collectively have people to sort of respond.
And I went to a very small and underfunded state school for undergrad, which was great for me because I had to do lots of research because there was no grad students around. But I think that sort of welcome wagon sort of thing, where these people come in and they're just as lost, even though the institution isn't as big, because they're very new to this environment, and having somebody who can kind of guide you even through, ordering and where there are resources on campus, like where does stuff sit, and having that person know not only their school, but kind of breaking down the silos that happen, I think, at any institution, and knowing what's around them beyond, your next door neighbors or even your own department. And I think that would have really helped some of the faculty I watched there.
Yeah, and I worked for C4, earlier. And so what we did over there was, to assign pretty much 20% of one person's effort to know the various cores that are there within the C4, and sort of keep track of all the information as well as the services that are present within the C4 system. And that way, there was one point person where everybody from various cores could go and pretty much ask questions and get the answers that they are looking for. So, like you can do it on a small scale as well, like a C4,
I agree.
This is Kristine again. I have one question that I want to ask, but I also don't want to take up the time. But are there any other questions that folks have for the team? Well, the question that I would like to ask is, so I think a lot of the folks on this call end up having to define for themselves what success looks like. And often, given the roles that we have, it often comes in the way of sort of non-traditional metrics for academia. And so I'm wondering if you guys could speak to how you develop your sense of what success looks like, both quantitatively and qualitatively.
This is Rebecca, I can kick off at least one thing. To me, one of the biggest metrics, satisfaction surveys are great, but more than anything, I think it's when we see people referring other people. So we are looking, one of the things that we track, we capture the unique ID of a person and then the person that might have referred them. I'm sort of interested in social networks. And I think last time I looked, something like almost 40% of the people that get our consultations have been referred. So that means that somebody had a great experience. And so that's sort of a mixture of quantitative, I guess. It's mainly quantitative, but obviously there was a qualitative aspect because the person would do a handoff.
And the same thing when you onboard somebody and they come and ask questions of you again, like you get these probably hot spots of people that are sending you to everybody and asking you a lot of questions. I know that we had one guy who was half VA, half School of Medicine, who came back to me in the first couple of months, probably 10 times. And, it makes you feel good, okay, I must have helped him well enough that he's still asking me questions, and so that's something that I always look out for.
We also have a formal process that after 3 months of onboarding, we circle back with the new faculty just to check in to see how things are going. And I specifically asked about the successes for the referrals that we made, and were they helpful? We also want to know if they secured funding, if they came to us for grant writing, or if they've published any of the work. Because I always ask them to share their successes so that we know the benefits long term of the information that we provide to them as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're just about out of time, so thank you guys so much for taking the time to be here and to tell us more about Dory and all of the services. And again, the the webinar is being recorded right now, so we will be posting this on the Intereach website under the webinar archives link, and so you can find it there and share with others if you feel so inclined. And feel free to email us if you have any questions. myRESEARCHnavigators@duke.edu.
Thanks for having us, Kristine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.